Hey guys. How are you? Hope you are doing great, and yeah, I have a great story for you guys today. We will see how a person got reincarnated in Attack on Titan world. With Chakra and Mangekyo Sharingan and Susanoo in his arsenal, how he will change the world of Attack on Titan. Chapter 31, The General Situation. Mikasa slowly approached Annie, and almost instantly, the two girls moved at the same time. Mikasa ran towards Annie as fast as a leopard, using both hands and feet, punches and elbows. She attacked Annie directly with a tidal wave of continuous attacks. Annie retreated again and again. Her strength and speed were obviously no match for Mikasa's. Annie held back the pain in her arms. She vigilantly blocked and held back Mikasa's attacks and steadied her movements. Every now and then she would counterattack. Burst. Mikasa's side kick was blocked by Annie's bent knee. Annie stepped forward and the two front legs crossed. Annie hugged Mikasa's left hand with her left hand, wrapped her right hand around Mikasa's neck like a beautiful snake. Mikasa then reacted. Quickly, her right arm hugged Annie's waist tightly. The two were entangled in an ambiguous posture, but each exerted their physical strength on the other, and it was difficult for both parties to keep their balance. It can't be such a heated fight. Takashi thought excitedly. Mikasa and Annie fell to the ground at the same time, tangled and rolled around for several turns before separating, and then quickly got up at the same time. At this point, they both had some dust on their clothes, their hair was in disarray, and they looked a little embarrassed. Neither Mikasa nor Annie had any intention of fixing their appearance, and they looked at each other indifferently. After a moment of confrontation, Mikasa and Annie ran towards each other again, with no intention of stopping. It seems that if there is no winner, it's impossible for them to stop. Bang! Pfoot! This time, the two sides didn't keep their hands. Fists covered their faces, elbows hit their chests, kicks hit their legs. No matter how hard they hit each other, they didn't stop. The soldiers in the vicinity were stupefied. Mikasa's attack was powerful, and her movements were lightning fast, gaining the upper hand. Annie can only defend first against this arrogant attack, with a cold look in her eyes, waiting for the opportunity to find fault. In terms of the skills of unloading, grabbing, holding and throwing, Annie is better, but Mikasa's physical fitness is far superior to ordinary people, and strength and speed are higher than Annie's. In addition, Mikasa is not completely pressed by strength and also has extraordinary fighting skills. However, Mikasa's current fighting skills are not systematic and relatively scattered, but it will be difficult to tell in the future. Takashi discovered that Krista on the right had covered her small mouth and seemed to be frightened by the brutal game of the two girls. What's wrong? It's for sure that Yama is more aggressive, I can't help but say it. Takashi said quietly. Mina was sweating on her forehead. Is it really okay to hit like that? Aren't they afraid of disfigurement? Not only girls, but many masculine men also feel a little afraid. This is not at all a normal training fight. On the field, a round of attacks was blocked or missed. Mikasa's offensive slowed down and Annie instantly grabbed Mikasa's hands and placed them in front of her. Burst! Mikasa and Annie collided with each other, their foreheads touched, their eyes met and the two beautiful faces almost kissed. Is it a kiss? Takashi felt that this was not the right script of the fight. Annie hugged Mikasa's neck with both hands and stretched her right leg forward behind Mikasa's front leg. All the strength of her body exploded and she leaned forward, and Mikasa couldn't help but fall backwards. However, she responded quickly, hugging Annie's waist with both hands again, forcibly twisting half of her body and falling to the ground face to face with Annie. Punch! After the two fell to the ground, Mikasa was pressed against the ground with her arms exerting force to Annie's strength, and one rolled and pressed Annie, but her hands were also pressed against the ground by Annie's back, and her neck was pressed by Annie. It's quiet now, both of them can't stand up. Mikasa was lying on top of Annie, and his arm could not be pulled out by the weight of the two people. Mikasa looked at Annie's delicate face and said, "Let go of me, how long are you going to lie like this?" Annie smiled, "Never mind, you can't hit me if I hold you like this." The two looked at each other, not yielding to each other. Annie lowered her voice and whispered, "Why do you care so much about Eren? Is he just a family member?" Mikasa's expression changed slightly and she said softly, "It has nothing to do with you. Annie, I don't think boys like violent girls. Me, I wouldn't mind a violent woman." Takashi smiled before being hit by Yama. The voices of the two were very low, and others in the noisy training ground couldn't hear what they were saying clearly. Takashi just watched the confrontation with stars in his eyes, appreciating the brilliant techniques both girls were displaying. Just as everything was about to get more intense, Instructor Keith approached with other instructors and shouted, "Stop right now, the sparring is over." When everyone heard the words "Den Instructor Keith," they fell silent and slowly moved to the side. The instructors were a little late. Well, it's not like there was a winner. Takashi thought silently. Mina said, "That's all for today, class was dismissed." Too bad, I liked how things were going. If they had a few more minutes, the winner would have been Mikasa. Jean said with a bright smile. Stop talking nonsense, if they'd had a few more minutes, Annie would have come out the winner. Marco Bot disagreed with Jean Kirstein's words. Huh? Are you telling me Annie could have won? Jean asked, slightly annoyed. Takashi looked at this pair of friends and thought that the next moment they would fight to prove who would be the winner, Mikasa or Annie. However, with Instructor Keith's instruction, this dream duel had ended hastily and neither girl continued to fight. In the end, it was not known who won and who lost. Strangely enough, Eren still learned martial arts from Annie during the hand-to-hand combat training, but Mikasa and Annie did not fight again, as if everything had gone back to the way it was before. Takashi was puzzled, is this the end? Isn't there something else? Isn't there a tiebreaker after the first season? However, Takashi was one more of those who were left with those doubts in his memory. Days passed, and the weather gradually became cooler. Today, Instructor Keith announced something to everyone. Instructor Keith stood on the high platform and looked at everyone. It is winter and the firewood is running out. In the last 2 days, everyone will go to cut firewood and you must send a special batch to the nearest garrison corps. I don't want any complaints, it won't be worse than training more tired. It's really inspiring. Takashi wiped away a fake tear. Nelson looked at Takashi and smiled. This is the first task we are assigned to support the garrison corps. It is said that this will continue to happen until the training corps is disbanded. You are right, we will possibly start with more important tasks sometime later. Takashi nodded with understanding. The garrison troops were known to be in charge of defending the wall from the Titans. Their main task was to improve the walls and repair them, patrol and maintain order within the walls. However, many were not happy with the idea of chopping firewood for others when they had a goal of being soldiers. Everyone was arguing for a while, but no one objected, not to mention whether the objection was useful or not. As Instructor Keith said, it would be no more strenuous than training. After the assigned task to collect and cut firewood for the garrison army was handed over, all the soldiers of the training corps went to the forest to cut firewood. Bang! 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 bang. There was a large array of axes chopping large and small logs. I can understand that we cut firewood to replenish the base's inventory. Why should we send a batch to the garrison regiment? Connie wiped his sweat and voiced his thoughts. I don't know, they should be able to buy it, wood isn't expensive anyway. Takashi chopped down a small tree with an axe, maybe they can save some money to buy wine if they do it this way. This sentence reminded Eren of Uncle Hens the garrison soldier. Before the Titans broke through the wall, he had been drunk all day. How much he hated all this before, but unfortunately he can't see it anymore. Armin tied the cut firewood with and explained, the instructor did not say why, but it's okay. I heard that soldiers in the training corps in the north often do this kind of thing. You don't have to guess, I know what's going on. According to my uncle, who was a garrison soldier, after the Titans broke through Mary's wall, the garrison soldiers at Rose's wall began training to reacquaint themselves with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. Some are preparing, they know that sooner or later they will face the Titans and by then they will be ready. Marco said suddenly. Armin understood in an instant, and the training must consume a lot of gas, blades, food and healing medicines, and after the fall of the Wall of Mary, we lost a third of the land and a tenth of the population, and taxes have also been reduced, so now the funding for the garrison regiment is also scarce. Connie said, it looks like everyone is having a hard time. Sasha suddenly got a little angry, I mean, the forest has been affected and there's no place to hunt. Eren shouted excitedly, I'll kill all the Titans. Everyone knows the situation now, are you still thinking of running away? The scene was silent for a while and no one spoke, so this time Jean didn't stand up to mock Eren. In fact, she hasn't fought with Eren over this kind of thing since the last special training. Of course, other little things are still loud in those two's mouths. The current situation is that, unlike the peaceful life that had been undisturbed by the Titans for over 100 years, the Titans have become an unavoidable problem. Among the more than 200 soldiers in training, most will eventually join the garrison corps, except for the 10 finalists who are eligible to join the military police regiment. Now it seems that the garrisoned corps is not as comfortable as before, reflecting the tense situation everywhere. Chapter 32, Armin Determined. In October 848 there was a heavy thunderstorm. Under the heavy rain, a group of soldiers from the training corps ran in the dark forest with raincoats over their bodies, a heavy backpack and equipped with their three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. This time there was a race that tested physical strength, regardless of whether it was a sunny day or there was a thunderstorm. This test should be performed regularly. Instructor Keith rode a horse with a raincoat and kept urging everyone closely. Takashi this time did not run in the middle of the group of soldiers, this time he kept some speed in the front position, next to him was Mikasa, Eren and surprisingly Nelson. Nelson had been outdoing himself next to Takashi, he could now be among the top 40 to 30 soldiers in the corps. Eren looked back and said, damn, Armin is about to fall behind again. Takashi comforted him, don't worry, he's not that bad, I've never seen him give up since he got here. At the back of the group, Armin gasped deeply and gradually began to fall behind. Run, you're too slow, shouted Instructor Keith. What's the matter with you, Alert? You're falling behind, is it too heavy? Do you want to be the only one to take off his gear? Instructor Keith spat. If this was a mission, you'd be Titan food by now. Armin startled and ran forward with morale high. When Instructor Keith saw this, he led his horse to the front to urge other soldiers forward. Armin feels that his feet are getting heavier and heavier and, although he has been training for more than 2 years, his fitness is not responding to him the way he wants it to. Reina ran when he saw this and carried Amin's weight on himself. I must say, if Reina is really more sociable, it would give a very inspiring feeling. Give it to me, you'll slow us all down. This exercise scores for the final grade. Amin was a little surprised. No, Reina, if you help me, you'll lose points too. Reina said casually, then don't let him find out. Keith was watching. Do you really think I can't see? However, he waited a moment while he analyzed Amin's next moves. Amin gritted his teeth, reached out and grabbed the heavy backpack, loaded it on his back and ran forward. I don't want to be a burden. Running frantically, Amin's face was sore. He kept running and running, not thinking about anything, running the path forward with heavy steps, and when he didn't know the direction of the time, the training finally ended. The boy named Amin Alert leaned against a tree, panting heavily. Due to the rain, the melee training was cancelled, so that everyone could rest for a few hours before lunch and then conduct the training with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment in the afternoon. This training is also regardless of wind and rain. The Survey Corps generally chooses good weather for expeditions outside the wall, but if they stay outside the wall for a long time, they may encounter any kind of weather, so the training with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment must also be carried out under any kind of weather and conditions. In the dining room at noon, Takashi, Thomas and Amin were sitting together. This time it was Eren and Mikasa's turn to perform some extra tasks, so they were present. Amin rested his head on the mat and could barely support himself during the physical training. It was also because it was raining heavily and the road was muddy with mud, which left him completely exhausted. Takashi, are you really so determined to explore outside the walls? Asked Amin suddenly. Takashi, who was struggling with Sasha, who suddenly arrived to steal his bread, was stunned for a moment and said, yes, if you ask me the reason, I would tell you that she is not focused on something extraordinary. I grew up in the forest and learned how important it is to hunt. The difficulty all hunters faced after humanity was attacked by the Titans was depressing. At first I was safe and now there is no turning back. I want to create a better future for everyone and follow the next one to continue the fight against the Titans. Amin raised his head and stared at him. Really, is that why you do it? He looked a bit entangled and Amin finally asked, if I join the Survey Corps, will I be of any use? Takashi understands that Amin is really suspicious of his physical abilities now and said, it's just what you think right now, everyone can be good at something, think about your strengths and you can find your place in the team. This might be what many soldiers who only know how to kill Titans lack. With a somewhat unsure expression, Amin whispered, but I don't seem to have any strengths or talents. Don't say that. At least your brain is better than ours. It was not his intention to congratulate Amin. He was never that smart a man, so he focused on being observant. If he and Amin were compared, he wouldn't be able to think of many brilliant ideas. Amin feels a little embarrassed. No one had ever praised him before, except for Eren. Before he met Eren and Mikasa, Amin had no friends. Because of his fragility, his thoughts were out of sync with those of his peers. He almost grew up being bullied by all kinds of people until Eren appeared in his life. He appreciates his friends, but doesn't know what else he can do for them in the future. He wants to help Eren, but he doesn't know if he'll be a hindrance in the end. Anyone could say it's a great friendship. Takashi wouldn't dare say he carries that same feeling for other people he had just met. The only person Takashi cared about was inexplicably Sasha. He felt he should take care of her, but he still doubted if they were because of Sasha's dad's words. Armin looked at Takashi and remarked, "I'll do my best not to be a hindrance, but I've always been curious, what was it that happened to you to make you think that way? You say you're a hunter, but you're different from Sasha, just like you don't seem to be afraid of titans either. I can't understand it. Is it because you've never seen a titan?" Takashi was silent for a moment. In his previous world, Earth, he was an ordinary person with the chance given to him by life to be able to win the lottery. As for his experience once he left school, there was not much to say. He lived normally, pursuing his goals, led his family life and took care of his parents. Later, when those thieves broke into her house to steal, it was unexpected, but he defended and gave her life for her family. Now it could be said that she was a lonely person between her passing self and what she is now. Laughing casually, Takashi spread his hands and said, "I don't think so. I want to do something meaningful in this life, and if I can become a soldier, I will do it with all my heart in it. What do you think about that?" Therefore, he was silent for a while and said, "It is good and admirable that you have a vision about the future, honorable and suitable for our world. By the way, Mikasa should have told you already, your surname is the same as hers, you could have a closer relationship with her family." Takashi shook his head. He didn't necessarily have a family relationship with Mikasa in this world. What if he unexpectedly is Mikasa's cousin and a certain captain of the exploration corps in his uncle? Mikasa actually didn't like Takashi at all, thinking about how he filled Eren's head with many frustrating things. At this, Takashi felt a bit of a headache and remarked, "Maybe, who knows?" He doesn't remember the rest of the story and knew nothing about the Akamans besides that they were strong and invincible in battle, and the previous Takashi's father didn't mention anything significant in the forest life, even his last name might be false. So far all he can remember is his life as a child in the forest, shortly after a conversation with his father before his father entered the forest and disappeared. He vaguely remembered that his father's name was Cordell Ackerman. He was not a soldier and lived normally until his wife died and he decided to go into the woods to become a hunter. However, it was all very confusing and Takashi always felt a pounding headache when he tried to remember anything more than that. Takashi's father once said, "There will always be people who want to hurt you, others will need you to protect them. Live your life protecting those you love and keeping away those you don't want in your life." Oh, it's like that. Armin didn't ask any more questions. Although the relationship wasn't good, at least Takashi didn't fight with Mikasa. He took a deep breath and shouted loudly, "I've decided, I'm going to the exploration corps, for no reason, I just want to go there because my friends are there. I want to see the sea, but I also want to protect and support my comrades." Armin has made his decision and intends to find an opportunity to tell Eren and Mikasa about it. Takashi nodded. Even without him in this world, Armin would naturally go to the exploration corps and this outcome has nothing to do with him. However, Mikasa didn't want this outcome. She hadn't given up her dream of letting Eren live a normal life together with her. Even so, just as she diverted Armin's attention, Armin made up his mind to go to the exploration corps. Mikasa was tired. Takashi just felt that this had nothing to do with him. Without him, Eren, Armin and Mikasa would have to continue to fight for their freedom. In the dorm at night, Thomas in the top bunk couldn't help but complain, "Takashi, when do you think a day is going to be bad? Today it was raining all day, and as a result there was only physical training and practice with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment." Thomas felt that at this rate the future was not bright. Takashi, who was manipulating his chakra, said, "Future military soldier, we graduate in a little over a year." Thomas, who was lying on the bed, thought about his life ahead, training is so exhausting and I feel like I'm on the verge of collapse. Today I almost passed out on the morning run, and almost hit a tree in the afternoon. Don't complain, those who still stay are very tenacious and lucky. Don't forget that we are only 241 people in this base. Takashi said with a slight smile. Well, I hope we can all graduate smoothly. Thomas muttered silently. Chapter 33, The Resentful Barbers. Time passed very quickly, and a heavy snowfall fell silently. This morning, when Takashi opened the bedroom door, all he saw were the snowflakes falling from the sky and the largely frozen ground. It was now December 848, and soon to be 849, and he has spent more than half the time in peace. Today being a rare day of rest at the end of each month, Takashi got up early and carried a bucket of well-prepared feed to feed the horse he called Barbers. Although there were riding training sessions, they were not as frequent as before. Catching a snowflake in his hands and exhaling a white breath, Takashi walked to the stable unhurriedly. The lines of footprints on the ground showed that someone had already gone to feed the horses. Feeding the horses, chopping firewood, traveling to another world. The interesting thing is that he has done all that, but he still can't be sure to face the evil of this world and be able to survive. When he arrived at the stable, he found his horse. After seeing Takashi's arrival, Barbers snorted and turned his head away from his food. Touching the horse's head, Takashi knew that Barbers was a bit angry and there was nothing he could do. He had not fed him well recently and there was no fresh fodder at this time due to the cold weather. After touching Barber's mane for a while, he found that he didn't want to eat. Takashi was a bit helpless, his horse was a bit stubborn. Sasha next door was also feeding her horse. After seeing Takashi's situation, she couldn't help but laugh. Your horse is very temperamental. Takashi turned to look at Sasha not far to the right. I can't help it. This time the fresh grass is over. It's already winter after all. Yes, it's already winter. Sasha paused and muttered, I don't know if my father can hunt enough prey this time. No, possibly we won't do that anymore. Sasha reacted somewhat disappointed. The members of her clan were willing to give up their way of living life as the ancestors did. Her father even gave up his way of life to adapt to the situation in the world. Since you're so worried about your family, why don't you go back this time and take a look around? You don't seem to have been home since we got here. Takashi reminded her. Unlike him, who had no place to return to, Sasha still had a home to return to. Sasha was silent for a while, her expression somewhat nervous. No. No, my father said it was necessary. I haven't learned to make friends and be someone different. Takashi smiled. He thought about the days he hunted with Sasha around the base. She was happy every time he hunted in the forest, but unfortunately the arrows had been damaged and lately there was no time. At this, he couldn't help but ask directly, Aunt Connie and I your friends? Don't you get along with the witch Yama and Krista? Mikasa, Mina and the others are your friends too. Sasha was very moved. Thank you, I only regret it, I shouldn't have fought with my father. TSK. That's really touching, Takashi, when did you become such a gentleman? Look how excited Sasha is. A sarcastic exclamation was heard and there was no telling when Yama and Krista came with horse feed. The only woman who could say that without embarrassment was the witch Yama. Takashi couldn't help but roll his eyes. Looks like you and Krista developed an annoying ability to appear behind people without making a sound. Because Yama and Krista were also on the hunting team during that time, Sasha, Yama and Krista were already quite familiar with them. Of course, even acquaintances don't expect to hear anything good from Yama's mouth. Takashi, who knew a lot more about Yama, didn't fare any better than the others. How could Yama honestly shut up? Be honest, you want to be Sasha's boyfriend. Sasha suddenly blushed. It's not like that, we don't. Takashi was speechless. Yama, do you think I'm talking to a woman just to make her my girlfriend? Yama snorted coldly. Then why does my Krista talk about you every day and take you as a role model? Isn't it because you said something strange to her? Krista was about to answer but was rebuked by Yama's hand quickly. How? What happened? Takashi was a little confused. That shouldn't have happened. He was sure he never said anything special to Krista, let alone flirting with her. Not even with someone in his previous life did he flirt. After laughing for a while, he continued to be a noble bachelor. Sasha realized she was being mistaken for someone a little more than Takashi's friend and stepped back with an embarrassed but polite smile. Takashi felt he should alleviate her aggravation and shouted, "It's all nonsense. I really didn't say anything out of line to Krista, you neurotic witch, it's slander from you and your stinking mouth. Krista is gentle, cute and helpful. There are many more male soldiers who want to be with her than Mikasa and Annie. After all, the latter two are at least hard to get along with because of their coldness. And Krista seems to be easy to fool, someone easy to get along with being, but no one succeeds in getting anything, because they can't get past the witch Yama. It is not known how many children who tried to conquer Krista were molded by Yama. By the way, many doubted if it was really worth it. All those who tried to get close to Krista said, is it so hard to get close to Krista? And now that witch Yama is bothering him. If he really did something like this, it's okay and he accepts it. The problem is that Takashi didn't do anything but training, so he couldn't help but complain. Yama wanted to keep talking to Krista, but finally broke free from her arm and said, Yama, it's not what you think, I'm just. When he was trying to explain, he suddenly didn't know how to do it. Krista remembered the day Takashi looked at her reading a book of a story about a knight. She asked him curiously, Takashi, do you like this book? Takashi, who had seen that book before, shook his head and said, I don't like the ending, I think everything would be better. Takashi compared the story about one he had seen in his previous world, slowly narrated it to Krista and then told her about how the knight married 3 princesses. How can he marry 3 women? Krista blushed, her big blue eyes were full of surprise. And why not? He's strong, brave and helped the kingdom out of a major crisis. Takashi asked disapprovingly. Krista's expression was a little surprised. Looking at Takashi's serious face, she barely calmed down, but, this isn't romantic at all. Takashi chuckled and said, a certain man said, where one person fits there will be room for another later on. Krista couldn't help but think that there was an apparent possibility. She couldn't imagine what life would be like with 3 women loving the same man. Only then Takashi realized that the gentle and kind girl in front of him was really uncomfortable. These complicated things, it can happen if everyone agrees, but it's very unlikely. Krista lowered her head and muttered, can it happen in real life? Turning back to the stable, Takashi more or less understood what was going on. So that was why. Takashi pointed at Krista. Hearing that, Krista didn't know how to explain the situation and after a while she calmed down. Yama reached out and fixed Krista's bangs. Okay, don't pay attention to those boring guys in the future, especially Takashi, it's not a good thing. Ha! Takashi said, Yama, it's okay for this time. But if you're so unreasonable in the future, I'll have to teach you a lesson on the battlefield. Yama snorted coldly, a guy without any grace and respect for women. Krista smiled apologetically at Takashi. However, before she could say anything to alleviate this embarrassing situation, Yama grabbed Krista's hand and pulled her away from the stable. Sasha, take care of your boyfriend and keep him polite. Yama left a few last words before leaving the place. I can't do that. Sasha was at a loss as to what to do. If Takashi were someone else, Yama wouldn't talk so much, she'd just curse him before tuning him out. But on the one hand, she is familiar with Takashi and they have a much closer relationship than with anyone else besides Krista. She likes to tease him and all those little things stay in the past the next day. At that time, Barbers was no longer mad at Takashi for his food and Takashi continued to feed the other horses a little depressed. Takashi, Sasha hesitated for a moment. Don't feel uncomfortable about Yama's words. Takashi smiled slightly and patted Sasha. However, Sasha was reddening and said, goodbye. Sasha ran out of the stable without another word, leaving a much more confused Takashi than he already was. Today was really an unlucky day and he couldn't be angry even after being scolded by Yama. Goodbye, Sasha. Takashi raised his hand to say goodbye. Thought of her enthusiastic friend who suddenly acted strangely. Only now did he realize that this world was full of weirdos. In other words, there don't seem to be many normal girls here, do there? Takashi's idea is correct, there aren't many normal people who actually play a role in the female characters like other stories. Mina is relatively normal, but she seems to get along with everyone in general. The witch Yama is a titan, Sasha loves food, Annie is cold, well no big deal and Mikasa just has Eren in her eyes. Not to mention the abnormal girls. Chapter 34, 7th Squadron. In the blink of an eye the month of February 849 had arrived. On the high wooden platform in front of the general training camp, Instructor Keith stared at the 240 soldiers below the stage, cleared his throat and announced, "So, as planned you will be divided into special squads. In the previous training, you were divided into several groups of different sizes, but this time the division is different, because most of the time you will be training in your squad until graduation." Instructor Keith paused and looked at the orderly group of people and then said, "A squad usually consists of 5 to 6 people, this time you will be divided into more than 40 classes. Only the top 30 in the usual training scores are eligible to serve as squad leaders, so at first, you will not be able to choose the most outstanding people in the corps. People must be in the same squadron and the purpose of the division is not only to train the team, but also so that the instructors can evaluate the entire squadron and they progress together. You now have only one day to find a squad. The people who will be suitable to be leaders will be announced on the notice board. Once you have completed your squadron, they will come to me to register. Squads that are not ordered will not be accepted. Training in this test is of great importance, as are the methods of distributing exploration corps squads. All usually deal with titans in groups of 2 to 3 and at most 6 people. This is usually the ideal way of fighting at the front. 1 or 2 people draw attention to themselves in front of the titan. The strongest person in the group attacks the titan's neck from the side or from behind. A squad can be divided into 2 groups, and tactics are flexible and diverse during training. From the training corps, the combat effectiveness and the naturalness of fighting in a group is usually increased. If in the scouting or garrison corps a recruit faces a titan together with his squad, then the results will be better. As for the military police regiment, there is nothing. The longer you are in that place, the more useless you become. Although the best soldiers in the training corps are usually there, their peak period is diminished by inactivity with the three-dimensional maneuver team. Seeing Instructor Keith turn around and leave, the soldiers in the audience suddenly started talking, and some people even started pulling people. There are no more 50 groups, and only a few can be squad leaders. Those who know of their abilities are already pulling people in. Mikasa looked at Eren. Eren, join me. No need, Mikasa, I already invited Amin, so you can invite someone else too. Eren interrupted Mikasa and grabbed Amin to entice someone else. Mikasa was a bit stunned when she saw Eren's figure leaving. Captain Takashi, Nelson has decided to join us. Thomas said to Takashi. Captain, I'll work hard. Nelson smiled, slightly embarrassed. Takashi nodded and said, we are 2 to 3 more people short in our group. He usually has one of the best training results. In fact, there are still many people who want to join his class, but Takashi is not very familiar with them. He wants to find some close people, but all of them might be leaders of their respective groups. When he tried to invite Sasha to his group, she told her that already joined Eren's group together with Amin in a strange way. Takashi forgot about the fact that Eren was almost annihilated in the Battle of Trust, otherwise he would definitely prevent Sasha from getting hurt. The protagonist of this world is simply not trustworthy. Just as Takashi was thinking of gathering some people to do the count, Krista ran up. Takashi, can I join your group? The pretty blue eyes looked at Takashi hopefully. After a slight daze, Takashi replied, Krista, don't you want to organize a group yourself? Krista usually has good training results, she can be in the top 20. Don't look at people's delicate appearance as a general result, she is not a weak person. No, I don't know how to lead others. Krista's sweet voice sounded. Then, you're welcome. After thinking for a moment, Takashi didn't refuse, looking at Yama who stood silently to the side, wondering why he didn't prompt her to stop, but this result is good if they want to support each other in the future. Yama's strength is very good, which is well understood by the male soldiers she faced when they tried to conquer Krista, and her performance in theory class is also very good, she could easily be in the top 15. Apparently aware of the doubt in Takashi's eyes, Yama chuckled, don't be surprised, I thought you would look for me first to join your group. You're right, I was about to look for you because of that. Doubting if their group was balanced, Takashi invited a 6th member, and that was the fearful Daz, to their group. With a disapproving snort, Yama asked, even if Krista and I leave, wouldn't there be 12 people more unfortunate than without us? I don't want to be the squad leader. Takashi spread his hands and decided to give it a try. It's okay, I have no problem, let's go to Instructor Keith to register, I hope we can pass. Don't worry, with the dead weight that is Daz, it will be more than enough to balance the scales. Yama said with a cold expression. I'll try to get better. Daz said with a shaky voice. With this, Takashi's group had been completed with the maximum number of participants, Nelson, Thomas, Yama, Krista, Daz and Takashi. Will the bald Keith be satisfied? If not, he might try to draw Thomas away, he definitely needed Yama on his side to keep an eye on her. Thus, the 6 people walked straight to Instructor Keith's office. At this point, most of the people had not been divided into classes and their group was relatively the fastest to arrive. After waiting for a while, a group of people who arrived before Takashi and the others were dismissed, and then Keith called the 6 into the office. Instructor Keith sat behind his desk. Seeing Takashi, Yama, Krista, Nelson, Thomas and Daz coming in, he frowned slightly. Between the 6 people, even Thomas and Nelson had around 70 and 80 points in the most recent training. Nelson was originally at a very low level along with Daz, who was one of the last to arrive at the camp in the snow test. However, Nelson changed a lot in this last year due to the training he had with Takashi for a while, which increased all of his stats. Instructor Keith's face showed no anger. Wasn't I clear that, in principle, so many elites are not allowed in one group? Before Takashi could explain, Yama said, I'm not used to leading others, so naturally I have to choose a guy who is stronger than me and hardly somewhat reliable. Takashi heard that he did not move from behind, and his heart was dark. Even if she could allow Yama's comments, this titan which doesn't reserve herself before anyone to blurt out hurtful remarks. It's a pity, I'll forgive her this time due to the fact that I trust me. Instructor Keith neither agreed nor refuted Yama, but looked at Krista instead and asked, and you? Krista Lenz. Krista was stunned for a moment. She hadn't expected Instructor Keith to ask her a question. She hesitated for a moment and said, I think I still have many deficiencies. I hope to learn from Takashi. After a while of silence, Instructor Keith said to Takashi, Takashi Ackerman, give me a reason why I should let this group pass. Without hesitation, Takashi said bluntly, I trust that I will not disappoint my teammates and I will be a good leader for them. Both the weaker ones as well as the stronger ones will outperform them, and at the end of the day, you won't notice who is the squad leader of this group. Instructor Keith suddenly smiled, you are lucky, the youngsters are quite arrogant, not to mention the best youngsters, there is no team similar to yours. Keith took the pen and began to fill out the form without complaint, first to arrive with several strong recruits, first to be accepted. You are the 7th group. Yes. Nelson shouted with excitement. We're lucky. Thomas also smiled in relief. Turning his head, he looked at Krista, Yama, Nelson, Daz and Thomes, and couldn't help but laugh. 7th group, go ahead. Yes, squad leader. They all replied. Instructor Keith watched the 6 people from Takashi's class leave. In fact, Takashi was one of the recruits he admired the most. He was anxious about his future. It is true that Takashi sometimes told his friends that he was not good at everything. However, that guy is indeed a natural warrior to lead and make others overcome. He didn't know if Takashi was born with that ability or had been trained before coming to this place. Keith thought to himself that Eren had twice as many goals as ordinary people. Takashi on his side had a will to fight stronger than anyone else. Chapter 35, A New Phase of Training. The time is gradually approaching the end of March, which is the season when spring flowers bloom and all things grow. After the training corps was divided into special squads, team training began. Usually, squad training is one day and the other based on general training is another day. Of course, the so-called general training is usually physical training, riding, hand-to-hand combat and theoretical classes are still together with the training corps. Squads are just to enhance team participation with the 3-dimensional maneuver team. Today the day was nice, the sky was clear and the sun was shining slightly. In the afternoon, everyone was training in their squadrons with the 3-dimensional maneuver team and the task was to cut wooden titans. Krista, the body's center of gravity when using the equipment is mainly at the waist and soles of the feet. Pay attention to the cutting angle when attacking the titan. If you have less strength than required, you should try to make use of your body's inertia as much as possible, or use your own gravity to swing the swords diagonally when descending. Thomas, don't cut with brute force alone, the sharpness of the blade makes it easier to use, Remember to adjust the cutting angle and stabilize your body when attacking. Nelson, you must pay attention to your surroundings and always have an anchor point for the next hook. Don't increase your speed before you find a landing point to keep moving. Yama, I've reminded you many times, don't hold down the mid trigger of your swords for too long. I know your speed increases exponentially, but the gas also increases your rate of depletion and that's not suitable during a battle. Daz, focus on mobilizing better in the hood, don't try to attack if you are not sure of making a correct cut. You always doubt your attack, you're afraid to move faster and I don't think that's enough to improve in the other aspects. Takashi watched his teammates training closely and pointed out the problems of all of them. Understood, squad leader. Krista replied warmly. Thomas looked at the worn blade in his hands, a little embarrassed. Takashi, I'll pay attention next time. Understood. Nelson listened carefully to all his mistakes. He had been learning from Takashi for a long time, so he knew how important it was to listen to him. I understand, your big sister listened carefully. Yama naturally replied in a bold voice. Seeing everyone who had descended to the ground, Takashi nodded, okay, let me demonstrate. He pulled the trigger, the hook attached to a branch and the compressed gas was expelled, causing the retractable rope to snap back towards the team. Whoosh! Takashi's body quickly flew over a titan target made of wood. The neck of this titan is made of a material that simulates the muscles of a titan. Cut! Following the inertia of his body's movement, Takashi cut the titan target's neck with his swords. The incisions are perfect in both angle and depth, ensuring an immediate casualty. Then, the hook that had retracted to the team came out again and by aiming his waist, Takashi maneuvered his speed making minute use of his compressed gas to land quickly. It feels the same every time, I feel like I'm flying next to the clouds. Takashi sighed a little as he felt the earth once again on his feet. Our squadron leader is amazing. Admired Krista lightly. Takashi looked at Krista silently. He had told her that she didn't need to call him squad leader all the time, it was kind of embarrassing. However, Krista and with help from Nelson disagreed. Well, you do have some superior skills. Yama was annoyed when she heard Krista's words and habitually attacked Takashi with venomous words. Nelson became a little serious and announced a message to Takashi, squad leader, just now, an instructor came and said to meet you in the courtyard after our practice. Shall we go now? Looking at the glare of the sun, Takashi felt that the time was almost over and said, let's see what Instructor Keith has to say, I hope and it's not bad news. Yama said indifferently, no matter what he has to say, I've learned all that was to be learned in this place. Krista blinked, come on, it's no good being late. If we were late, Instructor Keith would possibly punish us. Daz spoke in a fearful voice. I'm sure of it. Thomas nodded. Takashi then led his squad into the courtyard and then looked at the bald instructor on the high platform. After waiting a while longer, Instructor Keith moistened his throat when he saw that everyone had arrived. Cough. Let me announce something. In May, during the exercise training in the Trust District, the largest garrison corps command, Commander Pixis, will come to inspect your development. So, give a good demonstration of what you are capable of. This training will not only factor into the final score, but will also have a bright future for each of you if the commander takes notice of you. After Instructor Keith finished speaking, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a group of soldiers from the training who were talking about it. Only the top 10 of the entire corps in the final score are eligible to enter the military police corps and very few people dared to go to the scouting corps, so most would be inside the garrison troops, and it would be very useful if they are valued by Commander Pixis, and more importantly if that exercise will be included in the final evaluation. In addition, the Garrison Corps Commander also has the qualifications to recommend outstanding garrison soldiers to join the Gendarmerie Regiment, which is also a way to join the Military Police Regiment. I have to do well. If you behave well and are appreciated, it's no worse than going to the gendarmerie. I haven't been to the Trust District yet. I want to see what that town is like. Everyone was very excited, but someone in specific was grimacing with irritability. He was from the Trust region. He'll go back home, but he's not happy. Go to hell with the Titans, I must join the gendarmerie. Jean growled inwardly. Takashi was a little surprised. He still had an impression of Commander Pixis. In the original story, he decisively used Eren's Titan power to launch the Reconquest battle to the Trust District. But Takashi didn't think much of that. He's just a trainee who hasn't graduated yet and can't say anything at the moment to help in the future. The training went on in an orderly manner, and the time gradually came to the day. Early in the morning on May the 1st, everyone loaded their luggage and began to follow Instructor Keith to the Trust District. Raising his hand to block the sunlight over his head, Eren looked off into the distance, and Rose's wall was already in sight. He couldn't help but remember his hometown, Shiganshina District. What's wrong, don't you feel well? Mikasa asked worriedly, looking at Eren, who was a bit depressed. It's okay, I just remembered our hometown. Eren shook his head and didn't say much. He would definitely go back to his hometown, no matter how many obstacles came his way. Takashi also looked off into the distance at the Great Wall at least 50 meters high across the horizon, as along the magnificent wall stretched to the end of sight, and evidently as a human from another world there was a trace of surprise. A monstrosity of a wall so thick that it could not be easily breached by Titans. However, with the level of architecture and technology that went into creating such a huge wall, it would be impossible to make it so high, so how was it created? A great miracle for people who only believe in science. Shaking his head, Takashi didn't think much about it. If he hadn't known the name of the world he was sent to, he would have wondered if he had arrived in the world of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings among others. However, here there were no dragons or magic, here there were Titans. It was already 9 a.m. when Takashi and the others walked through the gate and into the city of the Trist district that lies south of the Rose Wall. This exercise simulates the situation where the Titans go through the Trist district. The training soldiers are randomly divided into 3 teams and the exercise is divided into 2 parts. One part of the training soldiers assists in the evacuation of civilians and the other part directly attacks the Titans, and each squad has its own zone. Jean Kirchstein looked at the familiar streets, but the familiar landscape was anything but happy. Many people in the training corps came from the Trust district, like Thomas Wagner. Jean's home is also here, but he hates being here, knowing that the days ahead will become annoying. Although the Trust district is a city, it is considered small. When you look up, you can see the high city wall, which makes you feel like a bird in a cage. Thomas Wagner expressed his feelings, the depression of adolescence, the generation gap with his parents, and the fantasy of an ideal girl make him feel like a bird in a cage. So he escaped from here to train the corps and vowed to go to the inner city to become a military policeman. Then he met Takashi and Eren, 2 guys who were the complete opposite of his ideals. Takashi taught him many things and they eventually became friends. Takashi was better than him in almost every training, although his tongue was a bit annoying. As for Eren, Eren's perception is very complicated. making him jealous that Eren could have a childhood love like Mikasa, expressing his hatred towards the Titans and his will to kill them all. He admitted traces of his fears in Eren's determination, for which he admires those thoughts. Now Thomas knew he was stronger, he trusted his teammates as his teammates trusted him. Takashi showed him his skills and strengths, how amazing he could be in training and the great improvements he could make in a short time. Doesn't he long for the outside world? Didn't he know about the Titan threat? He knows all this, he knows that someone needs to fight and someone else to follow that fight, and he also knows how dangerous it is to fight with Titans. The rational side tells him to go to a safe place, but there is a side that is pushing him to become a soldier of the Exploration Corps. A group of people walked through the streets of Trist, and Sasha next to them said excitedly, "There are so many delicious foods here." Connie looked around. He and Sasha grew up in the villages inside Rose's Wall just like Takashi, so they hadn't been in the city much. At this point, they were also a little happy. "It's my first time coming to the city on the wall, it feels good." Jean reluctantly smiled. "When you join the garrison, you can stay here forever. In the future, I will become a military policeman and come to see you, ha 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 ha." Sasha and Connie were a little unhappy, but said nothing, which sometimes made it unpleasant for Jean, but they have been together for 2 years and are a little used to Jean's thoughts. Armin next door asked, "Jean's house is here too, why don't you come back and take a look?" Marco said with a smile, "Yes, there is still some time. The exercise starts at 11 o'clock and Thomas has already gone home." Connie continued, "Your mother would be very happy to see you." In her rebellious time, Jean fought a lot with her mother. Marco said with a light smile. The group was a bit stunned and understood Jean's strange behavior, who was a bit upset on the way here. "By the way, where is Takashi?" Connie asked lightly. Sasha showed a strange look and said, "Well, he went somewhere else with his friend." "Is your relationship with Takashi normal? Did you two fight by any chance?" Armin asked softly. "No, not at all," Sasha said somewhat nervously. Takashi and Sasha hadn't been that close to each other for a while now, which was kind of strange. As for Takashi, he already went to Thomas' house for lunch. Chapter 36, What are they waiting for? Sound metallic. At 12 o'clock in the morning, the drill exercise officially began in the Trust district. All soldiers in the training corps had already been briefed on the procedure, as they were also aware of their roles in this test. As announced, the civilians who participated in this drill were all in the majority. The civilians quickly ran to the streets towards the city gate leading to the Maria Wall. Some soldiers directed all the civilians to specially marked streets to protect them from Titan attacks. These streets were marked to maintain a safe evacuation line so that everything would not turn into chaos. Meanwhile, some of the soldiers of the training corps in conjunction with the garrison corps maintained order. This is just a simulation of evacuation in case the Titans burst into the Trust district. The people who approached the gate leading to the Rose Wall felt like a tide. Many people complained about this drill as they ran and felt that the garrison corps was expending unnecessary energy. Of course, none of these people except for Takashi knew that a year later, this place would be infested by Titans. While some were keeping order on the ground, others were using the three-dimensional maneuvering team to slip over the houses and run towards Titan targets made of wood. "Jean, wait. That's not our direction, our mission is to kill the giant that slithered down the left side." Armin ran forward and yelled. "How can a soldier not kill a Titan when he sees one?" Jean hesitated. "Do you want to get more points?" Annie asked casually. "This exercise, She and Amin still at a distinct disadvantage with other teams. Jean didn't answer and flew towards a Titan target while operating the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. On a part of the wall in the Trust district, a female Garrison Corps soldier named Rita Line saw with a telescope that Jean's Squadron 21 had left the mission site. She deftly retracted her telescope and said to Commander Pixis, who was standing and yawning, "Commander, the 21st Training Corps Squadron has left its assigned mission site." Pixis, who was a bit distracted, woke up and looked at Rita. "What time is dinner?" With a helpless expression, Rita said, "Commander, we just had lunch and some training team soldiers left the mission site to earn points." The commander smiled and didn't mind. "It's normal for young people to be a little energetic. It's okay, it's good to be motivated and kill a Titan when they see one." On the streets of the Trust district, some soldiers of the training corps made use of their three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to accelerate their movement along the rooftops at high speed. Whoosh! Jean ran fast, but there was someone faster than Jean. Mikasa flew over the Titan target and with a spinning blow sliced the back of the Titan's wooden target. Slightly stunned, Jean immediately smiled. "Indeed, only you can outrun me." "Don't worry about that Takashi guy, he's on the other side anyway." Jean found another Titan target, but was snatched away by Connie and Sasha following him. This time he was so angry that he wanted to hit someone. On the other side of the city, Takashi's team was moving deftly through the structures of the houses. The formation he carried was just like the tip of an arrow, Takashi leading and the others on the sides. "Daz, Thomas!" Takashi shouted and ordered, "Distract the Titan as we have practiced so far. Yama and Krista move to the right side next to me." "Yes, Captain." They all moved and in their eyes there was only seriousness. Takashi had advised them to treat this simulation as something as real as possible. Concentrating his mind, Takashi moved quickly down the Titan and cut the sinews of the Titan's feet with his blades. These Titans were precision-made and there were several targets to attack from. Many of the inexperienced soldiers only attacked the back of the head with haste. However, Takashi knew that teamwork was more than necessary to get everyone to survive regardless of Titan casualties. In his opinion, it was better to increase the team's prowess than to rush alone straight into the Titan. He had to first consider the survival of his squad before making a decision, only then could they improve as a whole. "Now Nelson!" shouted Takashi loudly. "Yes." Whoosh! Nelson increased his speed and positioned himself at the back of the Titan's head and in an instant made a clean cut. After taking out the Titan, everyone naturally fell back into formation and continued on their way to their final target. "Nelson, now it's your turn to lead the squad," Takashi said as they headed to the next target of their mission. "Let's move faster, we need to consider our compressed gas and make it quick before we head back to base." With the orders given, Takashi exponentially increased their speed towards the target. "Thomas, we'll take care of the diversion and the rest subdue the Titan. Daz, keep an eye out for more Titans nearby." Nelson moved next to Thomas for the Titan's distraction. While Daz watched from a more secluded angle, Yama and Krista cut one after another of the Titan's sinews. Takashi, who flew into the sky, swiftly descended and cut the Titan's neck without hesitation. In the distance, a soldier in the role of assessment who was in charge of guarding Takashi's team was pleasantly surprised with the prowess of that squadron. "Unbelievable, the participation of that team as a whole is as if they are experienced. Not only do they move as a team and do everything necessary to eliminate a Titan, but they also change and keep moving without the need for their captain to command." "Which squad did you get to evaluate?" asked another Garrison Corps soldier. It's Squad 7, a real surprise, replied the instructor with surprise. To tell the truth, very few were taking this evaluation with wooden titans seriously. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, after the first day's exercise, Jean shouted angrily, "You're so despicable, you thieves!" Originally familiar with the terrain, he found many wooden titan targets, but the boys behind him always followed close behind and stole all the titans from him. Sitting on the ground, Sasha, who was eating potatoes, looked at Jean dissatisfied. "Despicable. Jean, are you so naive? Isn't it the prey of the one who grabs it first?" With a nasty snort, Jean said angrily, "Sweet potato girl, don't tell me about the fallacies of your hunting tribe." Sasha stood up angrily, "You bring it up again, damn it, everyone almost forgot." Connie, who was sitting off to the side, wasn't satisfied with causing trouble for no reason either. "That's right, apologize. You're not at all well today, do you miss your mother?" Clenching her teeth and throwing out a fist, Sasha immediately raised her leg to launch a counterattack. However, just as the fight was about to break out, Raina stopped them both. "Damn sweet potato girl, I'll kill all the titans in tomorrow's test. If you lose because of that, don't come and bother me." Sasha wanted to say something else, when Commander Pixis came out of nowhere. What a dynamic young man. "Commander." The soldiers of the training corps saluted in unison. Commander Pixis said, "It's a little outrageous to compete with each other in practice training. Let's compare each other's cooking skills. Tonight's dinner at 11 o'clock, a cooking showdown. I will be the judge." "This, with all due respect, Commander, we are soldiers not chefs." Jean was overwhelmed. Sasha pointed a piece of potato at Jean. "Are you that afraid of losing even in the kitchen? Damn it, I'll beat you, whether it's sweeping the floor or cooking." Jean roared angrily. Major Pixis looked a little excited and said, "That's it, cooking showdown, create your best cooking in the army." The soldiers also cheered and got excited. This duel is also quite interesting. Two of Pixis' subordinates, Rita and Gustav, looked at each other and felt a little helpless. The commander was too stubborn and did inexplicable things. When Takashi, on the other side, approached, what he looked at was the scene where everyone was shouting Sasha's name. Takashi was stunned. "What's the situation? This script is wrong. Could this be due to the influence of alcohol?" Eren and Mikasa, who were on duty to carry today's miscellaneous items, were carrying a box and looked blankly at the training corps entertainers. Eren asked, "What happened?" Mikasa answered blankly, "I don't know." Takashi didn't pay much attention to the so-called kitchen showdown, but instead used the afternoon to fly over the city wall of the Trust district with his three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to observe the general terrain along with the buildings. The Trust district is the closest breach towards the Maria Wall, so it was attacked by the Titans much more frequently and was the most important point where humanity had to resist any kind of attack. 5 years after the fall of the Maria Wall, the colossal Titan makes an appearance again, attacking Eren and the other graduates, breaking the cannons above for defense and breaking the outer gate, causing the city to be overrun by the Titans. How does the colossal Titan appear? Takashi couldn't identify a correct answer. If this is a story where the protagonist has his enemies closer than it seems, it could be anyone, the colossal Titan. Are they here? Takashi stopped at the top of the wall and looked at the gate to the south of the Trust district. Isn't it better to attack now? What are they waiting for? Takashi's eyes glowed scarlet red, his main Gekyo Sharingan glowing with anticipation. Commander Pixis and two of his subordinates also took a walk along the city wall. After a bit of wind, the commander was much more awake, but he had no intention of withdrawing the kitchen duel order. It was just a trivial matter. "Ha! Who's the young man standing in front?" Pixis asked his escorts about Takashi, who was wearing the uniform of the training corps. Gustav looked at Takashi, who was looking concentratedly at the buildings below the city not far away. "Commander, this is the training corps soldier named Takashi Ackerman. His qualifications are among the best. The recruit troops of Cycle 104, Keith and many other instructors speak highly of his skills." "Oh, is he? Shall we go ask him what he's doing?" Commander Pixis was interested. As Pixis approached from a distance, Takashi noticed, and after seeing the commander approach, he clenched his fists and saluted. "Commander Pixis." Pixis nodded and casually asked, "Recruit, what are you doing here? Are you looking at the scenery?" Chapter 37, Commander Pixis. Hearing Commander Pixis' words, Takashi deactivated his main Gekyo Sharingan and said in a calm voice, "I'm observing the terrain." The commander smiled. "Why observing the terrain?" After saying that, he waited attentively for this cadet's answer. He had heard about the outstanding Takashi Ackerman. He heard from a certain instructor some very interesting words about the Titans and their abnormality. Commander Pixis had heard from the instructor that these Titans that attacked the Shiganshina wall might be more intelligent and should be classified in a different place. Therefore, his curiosity increased when he saw the author of those words. "I'm just thinking, Commander, if the city gate falls, how to defend it or take it back?" Takashi said without taking his gaze from a distance. Looking at Takashi, Pixis didn't ask how to defend the Trust District or how to take it back. "Do you think the Colossal Titan and the battleship will attack the Trust region?" "Yes," Takashi said directly. "Why?" "There are Titans everywhere in the Mary Wall. It seems they can attack anywhere, right?" Of course, Takashi can't directly say that he knows that in a year the Trust District will be infested with Titans. He just said words using his intelligence and double meaning. "This place is the most convenient, quickest and most likely." "Tell me why." Commander Pixis walked to Takashi's side and looked in the direction of the door leading to the now Titans' territory. "I've been thinking about it for a long time, ever since I joined the training corps 2 years ago." Takashi said, looking at our map, "There is a very clear line from Shiganshina to the Maria Wall that extends all the way to the Trust District and goes straight to that gate. That is the shortest line and where quite possibly another attack will be carried sooner or later. Those Titans could be roaming nearby and it's only a matter of the Trust District gate being knocked down for humanity to lose this city." Commander Pixis smiled and said, "Many people have mentioned their opinion, so this is the reason for this exercise. But now it seems that humans can only passively defend themselves. We can't always send a large number of people to constantly watch the movements of the Titans. There are many intelligent people in this world, and Takashi also knows that his ideas are quite possibly nothing new and now do not have much meaning for the future. After all, it has been many years since the wall fell and many people should have thought about it. Surely they should have sent out missions to hunt down those Titans, right?" Takashi more or less understood the situation and pointed out, "But it's funny, where are those Titans? Did the Earth eat them?" I've certainly wondered that too. Where did they go and where are they?" Pixis drank some alcohol and said, "Many people believe they have disappeared and more believe they are waiting for the ideal moment to attack again. That colossal Titan, how tall is it and how is it possible that it hasn't been found or seen in all these years?" After saying that, Takashi pointed out, "We have to consider the time and important events that happen before humanity is attacked again. they might give us some clues. Everything is limited, it seems there's not much to do, just wait for us to get hit once again in the face. Pixis said with a smile. After thinking for a moment, Takashi pointed out, but at least we can do something that would help us be more prepared. What? The commander asked with a smile. He wasn't really curious, just bored. Pointing to the open space in front of the Trust District door on the lower right, Takashi noted, this area is very flat, which is not beneficial for the use of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. You might consider configuring that area and setting it up to be beneficial. Thick wooden poles, don't need that many, dozens of poles are enough for soldiers to move quickly and flee if necessary. Titans generally don't attack trees. With these poles you can set up a defense and counter-attack without taking so many casualties. An ideal way would be the warning the soldiers will receive. You need to be quick and concise to evacuate all the people quickly. Commander Pixis' eyes lit up slightly. If Takashi told him to build a stone wall for the artillery tower, he would definitely ignore it. After all, the cost is too high and cannot be considered. No one dares to be completely sure that the Titans will attack here, so it would be unwise to invest extra resources that could be useful elsewhere. The commander looked at his subordinate Gustav. Did you hear? Immediately after the exercise, make sure someone does that task. Remember to make the poles stable and have the soldiers practice mobility. Doing it outside the city would also be beneficial. Considering the danger and advantages, we would definitely come out ahead. Takashi said eloquently. Commander Pixis touched his mustache and nodded understandingly. It may be feasible to dig some holes and place large wooden posts scattered on both sides of the open space in front of the gate. It doesn't cost a lot of money anyway, and it's not impossible to do. Gustav was a little surprised. This is not a high-level suggestion, but it is undeniably something useful. Now the garrison corps could investigate whether it is optimal to leave the city from the gate and place some extra wooden posts in open spaces around the main road. Pixis looked at Takashi. If you want, you can come to me directly after graduation. Someone with your intelligence and observation would be very useful to the garrison corps. This invitation is a standing invitation. Takashi gave a military salute and said, "Thank you, Commander." After that, he said nothing more. He had shared some of the observations he had made when the soldiers acted to defend the Trust District. Now at most he was familiar with the commander of the Exploration Corps, which is beneficial. Takashi used the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to work off the wall and walked to the temporary station of the training corps in the Trust region. Ha 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 ha! Commander Pixis suddenly burst out laughing. Commander Pixis' escort, Gustav, gave Pixis a puzzled look. Now that I remember, a certain captain in the Exploration Corps asked a series of questions about a boy with the last name Ackerman. He was just curious. Commander Pixis said with a smile. Will you really take that recruit's words seriously? Gustav was still doubtful. Yes, is it surprising? All the garrison troops have been preparing to receive an attack at any moment, but no one has mentioned what that recruit said just now. Pixis paused for a moment. According to the defense plan, the garrison corps soldiers would attack outside the wall first. How long would that last? Pixis explained, if there are structures that can facilitate mobility outside and inside the main gate, the losses would be less and we will most likely hold out longer. Gustav understood Commander Pixis' words and said, that procedure was written long ago. I never thought I could improve the effectiveness of those orders. Everything can be improved in life, you just have to think carefully about the results. Pixis said lightly. Rita, The escort, who had so far remained silent, pondered for a moment. She was not clear if the commander asked Takashi, if the city is really pierced by the Titans, it will be useful for the garrison corps in charge of protecting the gate, but even if it doesn't work, there is nothing to lose. Rita didn't think that if the Titans breached the city gate, the garrison corps didn't necessarily have to fight in the open space in front of the gate. To be honest, she felt that this suggestion was a bit daring for a recruit who has no consideration about costs and time. No one can blame her. She did not know that there were people with the ability to become Titans. Gustav has similar ideas, but his assessment is higher. He also seems to know that we can't spend too much time and money to build a line of defense that may not be useful. I must say that the idea itself is fine. Considering he is only a recruit of no more than 14 years old, I think he is pretty good. At least he's willing to think and share those thoughts openly. As a member of Commander Pixis's escort group, Gustav was well aware that many recruits weren't really bad, considering many veterans had been wasting their time. In recent years, after the fall of the Maria Wall, the veterans trained more. Now, in the use of three-dimensional maneuver equipment, they may not be as good as the recruits who have been training for a long time, in terms of combat experience. None of the veterans have any experience, so at the end of the day there is no struggle difference in that regard. But the recruits also have some problems. Many recruits are reckless and go to the battlefield without considering the consequences. Some even disobey orders. Pixis made no comment after hearing it. For some reason, he felt that these dozens of thick wooden poles could be really useful. On the other hand, when Takashi returned, he discovered that Sasha, Connie and Reina went out and curiously returned with meat. Chapter 38, A Mother's Love. The confused Takashi observed all the chaos and asked what was going on. It turns out that after Sasha and Jean decided to have a formal showdown in the kitchen, they both thought of working with their own ingredients. If they both had meat, then definitely their dishes would be more popular than a vegetarian dish. So Jean and Sasha went in two different groups to hunt not far from the Trust district. Although Jean is a local, he is not familiar with the forest terrain and also does not know how to hunt. So Sasha took the lead in this small phase of their competitiveness. Entering the kitchen of the dimly lit temporary training corps base, Takashi saw Annie and Amin sitting at a table. This time they worked in the same squadron due to the reduction of recruits. Jean and Sasha would have a cooking competition, so he could give them both a few tips. Jean was in a very bad mood. She slammed the table in frustration, accidentally knocked over the cup and spilled water on her pants. Squeak! At that moment, a soldier from the garrison corps suddenly opened the door and walked in. Is Jean Kirstein here? Jean immediately stood up. I'm here. The garrison corps soldier looked at Jean. Your mother is here, she is looking for you. After saying that, he left immediately. Not long after, an adult lady of short stature entered the kitchen with a basket. Mrs. Kirstein is a short, stocky, adult woman with long brown hair tied in a ponytail. Like an average Trust citizen, she wears a plain dress covered with a red apron. Jean Kirstein, mother is here, why don't you go home and stay for a while? Mr. Wagner said Thomas and his friend went to his house for a visit. Mrs. Kirstein winced a little at the sight of her son. Is this Jean's mother? It looks like it. She looks normal. Very nice, unlike her son. They all whispered, making their mother seem like a nice lady. Jean was looking at his mother angrily. Many teenagers in their younger years despise the care and concern of their parents. The normal at this age is that not many are mature enough to appreciate every little extra detail and breath their mother and father gives. Many of the young people in this situation would be very embarrassed by what others think. The attentive mother found the water stain on her son's pants and reached out to wipe it up. Jean cried out in embarrassment and anger, "Stop it, I told you to come back." Stopping his mother, Jean looked overly agitated. Jean's mother was surprised for a moment. She looked at the people who had focused their eyes in her direction, smiled kindly and took some apples out of the basket. "Thank you for taking care of my family, Kirstine. Here are some fruits for you to eat." Jean finally couldn't take it anymore, and reached out her hand to put the fruit back in the basket, and then shoo her annoying mother away. Takashi grabbed Jean's hand, and Jean was surprised when he saw Takashi standing next to him at some unknown time. Takashi looked at Jean's mother and smiled, "Thank you for the gift." Jean has been a little tired from training recently and is in a bad mood. "Your son talks a lot about your excellent food and commented to me that he would try to visit you in a few days." Jean's mother seemed to realize that her son was not very welcoming to her. She flashed a gentle smile, "My son can become very direct, thank you for your good comments." Jean's mother, Mrs. Kirstine, put a box of food on the table and some fruit. "Son, this is a meal I prepared for you. I'm leaving first, remember to get along with everyone." Jean didn't know what to say. Takashi stopped himself from getting angry with his mother, and when he regained his composure, he was also aware that his attitude was very bad. "Mrs. Kirstine, walk carefully on your way back." Takashi politely said goodbye. Jean's mother left. Although her son has reached the stage of rebelliousness and no longer liked his mother taking care of him, at least she found that her son still made some reliable friends. Holding the box of food with one hand, Takashi smiled with mixed feelings and put the apples in Jean's hands. "What are you looking at? Don't you know you're making people uncomfortable? Haven't you ever seen a mother take care of her child? If they want an apple, they can ask Jean for it." Takashi said with a wry smile. Eren and Mikasa, who weren't far away, looked away. Eren couldn't bear his feelings at this moment either. Thinking about his mother, Eren lowered his head. As a child, he often fought with people and did not like to see his mother. In the blink of an eye, some annoying mothers could not be seen. Mikasa put her hand on Eren's shoulder and comforted him. "Jean, some of this place no longer has an annoying mother to fight with. Take good care of your mother and make sure you can go visit her. Don't forget to eat her food, we never know when we might get eaten by titans." Takashi gave a forced smile and patted Jean's shoulder. He missed his parents too. He had many moments when he cried at night and didn't know what to do. Why keep fighting in this world? Only then Takashi remembered that other people had their loved ones in this world, so he would do his best to make less mothers mourn the loss of their children. Takashi pushed him to the corner to sit down, where Annie and Amin were also sitting. He changed the subject and asked, "What's wrong? I heard they couldn't hunt anything." Amin also came too. "We didn't get any prey. Now that it's getting late, it's hard for us to beat Sasha's dish that carries meat." Annie looked at Takashi. She didn't communicate much with Takashi, except for a few fights in wrestling class. She stayed silent and didn't speak. Even though she was good at cooking simple dishes she knew, she didn't know what to do if she didn't have the right ingredients. At that moment, Jean opened her mother's food box and there was nothing in it. It was just a simple omelette, which was his favorite food as a child. Looking at the rice omelette carefully prepared by his mother, Jean was silent for a moment and said, "I know what to do." Both Amin and Annie looked at Jean with surprise. Except for the meat in the food storage, they couldn't think of anything that could defeat the meat Sasha caught. but the food in the food storage was not something they could use. Commander Pixis said they brought their own ingredients. Jean looked at Takashi. I need to make a vegetarian dish, can you help me? Takashi smiled confidently. It's not a problem to advise you under my knowledge. To be honest, I don't think meat is necessarily better than a dish with no meat in it. Commander Pixis said that as long as you guys were cooking, you could get help verbally from others. He had some cooking skills, so he could share his knowledge based on that. As for whether Sasha would be angry, the important thing is to buy her some potatoes at the market and some arrows to hunt with. Time passed slowly. Jean and Takashi were busy in the kitchen, and Amin and Annie helped them with little things. In the evening, on the other side, Eren was struggling to carry a box. He was on duty today, and the training corps naturally had to prepare some supplies when they arrived in the Trust region to participate in the exercise. Eren tried several times, but it wouldn't budge, and then he saw Mikasa easily carry 3 identical stacked boxes towards him. Don't worry Eren, you're just tired, that's all. Eren said to himself. Mikasa brought down the 3 stacked boxes, and when he saw that Eren couldn't move it, he wanted to come help. Eren reached out to stop her, he gritted his teeth and moved it by himself. He didn't believe it, he couldn't even carry a single box. Some people think Eren is single because of his tiny strength, but to some extent, Mikasa is also single because of great strength. Takashi, I'm strong, I can cook, I'm handsome and I can fight. What about my love life, isn't there a solution for that? In the kitchen, Jean is cooking the omelette with great excitement. This is her favorite and most familiar dish. She doesn't know if she can win in the end, so she does her best without caring about the outcome. On the other side of the kitchen, Takashi washes the potatoes and cuts the onions, puts them in a pot of hot water and lets them cook. This recipe is similar to one he remembers. It has salt, potatoes, onions, garlic, oil and eggs. Chapter 39, Culinary Competition. In the evening, in the kitchen, Armin looked at the onion mixed with the egg and the sweet potatoes with rice, his eyes showing hesitation at the vegetable mixture. It's not that Armin is not confident, but Sasha has meat. Meat is something valuable and unattainable for many people. Will that alone be enough to beat her? Jean didn't speak, he wasn't sure. After all, the ingredients were so different. Annie looked at Takashi with a calm face and said, "How sure are you?" Takashi was confident in everything he did without showing any hesitation and explained, "All things considered, is eating a dish with meat late at night satisfying? Still, the decision is not in our hands, so anything can happen. Commander Pixis may think Jean's dish is good, or on the other hand Sasha's. It depends on the commander's preference. We have a 50-50 chance of winning." Takashi pointed to the sweet potatoes in a small bowl mixed with the onion and garlic. "At least our taste isn't bad." Annie and Amin's eyes lit up slightly. In fact, Jean and Sasha's cooking is the latter. The commander's taste is the key to winning this competition. Sasha's side was a little slower. The rabbit meat she caught was slow to prepare. Sasha tried to replicate the dish Takashi made that time they went hunting. She added some salt and started frying the meat. Connie looked at the fragrant and incomparably tempting chicken meat. He swallowed saliva and said confidently, "This is a sure win." Reina was also more confident. Someone saw that Takashi was going to help Jean, but it shouldn't matter, they didn't get any meat. How could they lose if they got meat? Sasha is full of confidence. "Don't worry, the meat is invincible. I know Takashi is very good at cooking, but they don't have any potential ingredients." After all, Jean didn't catch any meat, so Sasha wasn't worried about losing. This competition is stable. In the evening, after all the soldiers finished their duties, they gathered in the mess hall to witness the competition of two of the training corps recruits. Right at 11 o'clock at night, Commander Pixis was sitting at a table. The instructor next to him announced to the recruits and some of the soldiers of the garrison corps to watch silently. The saucer showdown between Sasha Blouse and Jean Kirstein begins. Oh! The crowd cheered. Who do you think will win? Sasha. Jean doesn't seem to know how to cook, and they didn't get any prey in the afternoon. Many saw Takashi, Armin and Annie helping Jean to prepare her dish. Takashi and Annie are good at cooking, maybe with their help, Jean can win. Ha ha. So far I realize that Takashi can do anything except having a girlfriend. Ha ha ha. Thomas, if your squad leader hears you, he'll kill you. That Sasha wasn't his girlfriend. I heard Yama say it in the stable at the training corps base. I don't know, but I respect Takashi. The difference in ingredients is too big. Unless Commander Pixis is vegan, it would be impossible to win. There was a lot of discussion in the audience, and it was lively. Jean and Sasha had already pushed the food cart into the dining room and the food was covered. Takashi didn't go with Jean. Annie and Armin went up with Jean to support him, but he was just watching the amusing development from afar. He also heard the silly Thomas just now. He decided to go back and train Thomas under hellish conditions. All for the sake of his friend. He is so careless, he must be strong. It would be bad if he was killed at the hands of Titans. Sasha served the food first. She lifted the lid and placed a rabbit dish. It was full of amazing color and smell. It was very tempting at first sight. Gyu, everyone in the audience was a little excited. I suddenly feel a little hungry. Me too, I should have filled my stomach with bread. No suspense now. It's been 5 years since I tasted meat. In all that time I forgot what it tastes like. Pixis' eyes lit up behind the dining table. He cut a piece of meat with a knife and put it in his mouth with the help of a fork. Pixis said, "It's good, it's delicious, and it's like slashing titans on the battlefield." What kind of assessment is that? Takashi went blank at Pixis' words. After eating a few more bites, he paused and then let Jean approach with the dining cart. She set the plate on the table, lifted the lid, and the contents inside are very ordinary, a small pile of rice tortilla and a small bowl of an unknown sauce. Everyone in the audience suddenly fell silent, a little confused. This is too common, I can do it with just wheat. Pixis smiled and said nothing. He slowly ate the omelette, and from time to time used a spoon to take a bit of the rice. He was slowly finishing the dish in its entirety. Wiping his mouth with a napkin, the commander slowly stood up and announced in front of everyone in the audience, "The winner of this cooking showdown is Jean Kirstein." The coaches below the stage suddenly became noisy. My God! This result could have been turned around. The meat lost its value. It's a victory for the meatless kitchen. We poor people triumphed. Jean was also a little surprised. He really won. Sasha was stunned and unconvinced. She ran to the commander and asked, "Commander, why is this meat?" Pixis didn't get angry and looked at Sasha calmly. "Yes, it's meat, but it's just meat. It's a little uncomfortable to eat meat at night if you can't digest it." Sasha reacted and sat on the floor with a haggard face. "Did I forget to add the fixings? The potatoes and carrots I've always loved." But in the end all the meat was finished. Jean reached over and reached out to pull the surprised Sasha. Sasha thought Jean would tease her, but Jean comforted her. This time, the culinary confrontation came to an unexpected end. At 12 o'clock at night, Jean left for home, back to the house she hadn't been back to in 2 years. Dong dong. There was a knock at the door, and Jean's mother opened the door suspiciously and saw her son. "I'm back, Mom." "What a surprise, come in the house, it's cold, son." Homeless Jean returned home and found that he still had nothing in common with his mother, but at least he was happy to be able to spend time with his family. At the same time, Takashi was sitting outside the training corps base in the Trust district. "What a sad day, it comforts me that the stars are looking down on my frail figure." Takashi smiled slightly. He had a powerful Susanoo, but was hesitant to use it. He had friends but felt lonely. Today he felt his mother's absence more than ever. "Am I crying?" Takashi wiped the tears from his eyes in embarrassment. "You fucking loser, you're in an unbelievable world." "Takashi." A voice was heard far away in the darkness. "Sasha." Takashi was surprised to see Sasha with a happy expression. In her hands, she held a small plate with food. "Come before we are discovered, see what I have in store for you," Sasha said with a smile. Holding out his hands, Takashi looked at a rabbit leg on the plate. "You saved it for me?" Takashi asked with inexplicable feelings. "I thought you'd like it, it was the only thing I could leave for you without anyone seeing me." Sasha flashed a nervous smile. "Thanks, but I can't finish it alone." Takashi pulled Sasha to a corner and they sat in silence. He took the rabbit leg and with the help of a knife split the leg in 2 parts. "No, I saved it for you." Sasha stopped her words when a piece of the rabbit leg suddenly entered his mouth. Helplessly, Takashi took his share and ate it silently. "Your dish tastes amazing, for me it was the best." Takashi smiled slightly. "Liar, it's cold and doesn't taste good anymore." Sasha thought to herself, not thinking much about the things others say about Takashi and her. The next day was another half-day exercise. In the afternoon everyone packed up, followed instructor Keith out of the Trust district and back to the Rose Wall. Takashi raised his head and looked up at the instantly widening sky, and a feeling of freshness spontaneously arose. "I must say that although the Trust is a good place to live, it is a bit small." The 50-meter-high city wall always brings a depressing cage-like feeling. The space inside the Rose Wall is much larger, but compared to the outside world, even the place is too small. The sunset was turning red. In front, the base of the training corps was already visible to the naked eye. Jean walked to Takashi's side and said, "Thanks for yesterday." Takashi smiled, "You're welcome. I mean, if you hadn't stopped me yesterday, I would have gotten really angry for no reason and kicked my mother out." Jean smiled reassuringly. "It's normal to act like this at our age. As we all grow up we all have problems with our parents. However, it's our duty to stop and start appreciating every extra day our parents live. Just be careful in the future, become a military policeman and take your parents to the center of the city." Jean Kirstein sighed and said, "Yesterday I visited my home. I still felt inexplicably strange, but your words made me calm down and spend a quiet moment together with them." After a short silence, Takashi pointed out, "It's less than a year to graduate. Yes, let's work hard." In the evening, Thomas lay down on his bunk and grumbled, "The drill is finally over. Takashi, did you hear that? In the future, all days off will be cancelled and only 2 days will be taken at the end of each month." Takashi was doing push-ups on the lower bunk and said without taking much breath, "It's normal, we have to leave the base in January next year and graduate directly there after 3 months of internship in your hometown trust. By then you can go home every day." "Well, what I mean is that I want to take a break. After all, no matter how much I practice, I have no hope of being a military police officer. This year, because of Takashi, a guy who didn't exist before, the competition has become more intense. Although Takashi is sometimes evaluated lower than first place, he is sure to be in the top 10. Thomas is not bad, but it's hard to get into the top 10. This year is really a battle of giants. If Thomas is in the training corps up north, maybe he could be in the top 10 from that base. It's good to get used to it, isn't it just training? Thomas said, it's good to train, but it's also good to rest. I'm not like you, practicing boxing and push-ups every night, aren't you tired? Takashi completed the fourth set of 100 push-ups and stopped to rest. Fortunately, I'm not tired from training. Thomas stopped talking and Takashi successfully finished the conversation, then practiced his chakra control method. Chapter 40, Krista's Sincerity. Time flew by, time flew until the end of October 849. The close combat training has finished. After the physical training in the morning there was a military theory class where they learned many things such as the operation and maintenance of the cannons, how to reinforce and patrol the walls among other things. In an open space outside the training corps base, there was a long row of cannons and there was an instructor standing in front of everyone. As a soldier, it is also necessary to learn the exact use of artillery. You will learn that shells can stop titans. The correct use of this weapon by people can kill titans. Howitzers even then still have a low hit rate. After the instructor finished talking about the power and use of various shells, he told everyone how to handle it and personally tested how to operate it. What precautions should be taken? In fact, the theoretical class in the previous 3 weeks has been discussing these kinds of questions, but now it is only based on the real object. Okay, start the operation by squad. Ask questions if you don't understand, and be careful not to hurt anyone. After the instructor finished speaking, he instructed everyone to begin, and some of the male soldiers couldn't wait. This is the actual cannon operation under their own hands. There are a total of 8 guns on the field, and 6 people from 7 squadron are trying to fire artillery shells. Nelson put an ordinary shell into the cannon and Thomas was about to pull the strap. Cover your ears. Takashi reminded everyone, who were a little quiet. Many were not used to the roar of this gun. Krista and the others covered their ears with their hands. Bang! With a loud noise, the cannonball slammed into the open space in front of him, raising a cloud of smoke and dust. Takashi only felt his head buzzing. The cannon wasn't very powerful, but it was loud enough to deafen him. This gun is really powerful, Daz said in a shaky voice. Yuma shook her head and scolded, damn, this thing is really loud. Krista then withdrew her hands and breathed a sigh of relief. After a few more operations, their training for this class was over. It took them about an hour and a half to familiarize themselves with the use of cannons. Because there are only 8 cannons, the other squadrons were divided into 6 different classes to operate the cannons. After Takashi's group left, the second batch of squadrons started to leave. At this time, someone came to ask Krista, who had finished learning, for advice. Krista smiled and ran to help. Watching Krista endure the huge roar of the artillery fire, force a smile and enthusiastically help instruct everyone on how to operate the cannon, Takashi frowned. This girl was seriously ill. Do you mind? Takashi said to Yuma. Touching her forehead with her hand, Yuma felt a headache. I can't control it. She always seems to be helpful, even if she can't stand the loud noise of cannonballs. Whenever someone asks her for advice, she will run to help others. There are many similar things. I can only deal with those guys who have ulterior motives, but I'm not qualified to make the decisions for her on some things. Really? Takashi looked at this scene expressionlessly. After a while, he couldn't take it anymore and went straight to Krista. Takashi, what's wrong? Krista, who had been pushed aside by Takashi, looked at him with her blue eyes suspiciously. Looking slightly at Krista, Takashi advised, if you don't like to do things, don't force yourself, they can ask the instructor directly for their doubts. He is not against Krista helping others, if she enjoys it, he would never interfere. But obviously she couldn't stand the loud noise of the cannon fire, and forced herself to help others despite that. Krista hesitated, but I was asked to help, I should. Interrupting Krista's words, he said bluntly, you don't need to live like others need. You should know that many people admire you and love you very much. After a pause, Takashi said solemnly, you know a big secret of mine and I don't like that behavior you have, I don't like you being like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Krista panicked, I'm sorry, did I do something wrong? Takashi shook his head, no, in fact, this will be the first and last time you get advice on this situation from here on out. Everyone praises you for being a good person, but are you happy? Why do you always act soft in front of all the people expecting to be loved? If you don't like it, don't do it. But, we should be nice to people and help each other. Krista was a little overwhelmed. There's nothing wrong with being nice. I can't tell you a good reason, but I hope to see you be yourself, don't force yourself to act like that in front of others. We will always be hated by other people, that's a natural thing and no matter how well we act, in the end we can't do anything about it. Krista's eyes dodged, she lowered her head and remained silent. You know very well that me and Yama are delighted. We have certain difficulties, as friends we hope to see you act normally. Yama's expression was helpless, and she crossed his arms around his chest, not that she didn't convince her, but it didn't help. Takashi, I'm sorry, I want to ask you something, do your parents like you? Krista looked at Takashi with red eyes. Slightly dumbfounded, Takashi didn't understand why the goddess Krista suddenly asked this. When he was still on Earth, his mother was similar to Jean's mother. As for the previous Takashi, he was an orphan. And Takashi's identity now is a bit more complicated. Dad, why are we moving to a forest? Will we leave Uncle alone? Takashi, as a child, looked at his father with a confused expression. Touching little Takashi's head, Takashi's father said, I don't know either, just know that I'm doing it to protect you from this cruel and evil world. Remember that, son, remember to fight only for you and nothing else for you. What about my mother? Oh, your mother was weak and died shortly after giving birth to you. Takashi's father looked at his son with a somber expression. That rainy day, Takashi and his father left their home and headed for the forest, where until before arriving at the Cycle 104 training corps he lived. Suddenly, Takashi held his head in pain, a series of memories began to invade his mind uncontrollably. Is it sure he won't die? You don't know if it will turn out that way. I can't risk my son in this kind of experiment. The tests are done, we only have one chance before we are discovered. Once done, you have to disappear with your son. If it turns out your son will have in his possession the greatest weapon to fight the Titans. After hearing those words, Takashi remembered lying on a kind of stretcher blindfolded. The first person he looked at after that was his father. His eyes were full of worry and he was only glad when he woke up. Sleep now, son, You don't need to remember these painful moments. Just think about forgetting. You must forget. When you turn 15, I will tell you about how special your power is. Takashi's father said. What power are you talking about? Takashi came to himself and then looked at Krista. My parents died at an early age. I couldn't have a mother's love for a long time and I don't remember my father's appearance very well. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it would be that all parents love their children. Krista stared at Takashi. Really? All the books say that a mother loves her child, but my mother doesn't love me. She wanted me dead. On that farm it happened. Suddenly, the atmosphere became silent, and Yama looked at Krista in shock. She didn't know before. Krista stopped talking. She was the only one who still kept secrets with Takashi and Yama. She was the only one who knew of their biggest secrets, so she wanted to share in a certain way with them. With a sigh, Takashi looked at Krista with regret. The title of mother is not for the one who raises you or begets you. The title of mother is given to that woman who takes care of her children regardless of life's consequences. If she gave birth to you and does not show that love, she is not your mother. Being a mother is not only a blood connection, but also love and understanding. Don't blame yourself for that. I didn't have a mother and most certainly many other people didn't experience that feeling either. Let's live for ourselves and stop thinking about the past. We have to work hard for the present. Takashi said with a forlorn smile. Krista burst into tears. Yama didn't speak and hugged her tightly. She knew that she and Takashi were different from Krista. They are a time bomb that could explode at any moment without the possibility of escaping that explosion. Thomas and Nelson were surprised to see Krista cry. They knew Krista's identity, but were shocked to hear that her mother wanted her to die, which was too cruel for Krista, who was a child at the time. With a somewhat indifferent expression, Takashi looked at Thomas and Nelson. You've heard it all. Pay attention in the future. We can't control many things and we can't make decisions for Krista, but if there are those guys taking advantage of her kindness, crush them hard. Yes. They both nodded. The barrage of artillery fire continued, and the conversation here was only heard by everyone in the 7th Squadron. Daz didn't speak. He couldn't say any words of comfort for Krista and just watched. Takashi is no mentor about life. To be honest, he needs someone to tell him he is doing well in this place, but if he can do something for others he will do it without much thought. In this world you can't stay in misery. If you live in the past and don't strive to build a present, death will slowly embrace and you won't be able to do anything about it. That's it guys, hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Make sure you comment below what kind of stories you want to see next and any recommendation you have.